Sorry. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here today, both in person and online. I see a couple of familiar names, or I did, on the screen, so it's good to have you guys joining us online. My name is Blake Douglas. I'm the Executive Director of the UNLV Alumni Association. And the Alumni Office and our partners in UNLV Admissions are co-hosting this program today with an amazing group of panelists that are all UNLV alumni, 3 of which serve on our UNLV Alumni Association Board of Directors, and Anna, who is with US Bank and is a great partner both to the association through their goals coaching programs and other touches that we do with US Bank, and I'm proud to have you with us today as well. So with that, again, we'll welcome you all, learn a little bit about financial wellness. So I'll turn it over to Molly and we'll kick us off.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm with the Office of Admissions. As Blake mentioned, we partnered with alumni for this wonderful panel. Thank you guys so much for being here. And I will have you guys introduce yourselves and take it away. For those of you who have questions, feel free to dump it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and talk to us as if you were here in person too. It's a fun feature we have now. And you can chat with them as well. So there will be time for question and answers at the end of our presentation. So thank you again. And I'll have you all take it away. Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and start with Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Salazar. I am an ICF accredited coach in financial wellness and positive psychology. I have a bachelor's in sociology. I've been in the financial industry for 32 years, but I've been with US Bank the last 15 and managing the program the last 3.5, almost 4 years. And I'm very excited to be here talking about this topic.
Well, hey, everybody, I'm David Navarro. It's nice meeting some of you here in person a little bit earlier. I'm the Nevada president for Enterprise Bank and Trust. I also now teach here part-time financial literacy course, and I am the incoming president of the Alumni Association starting next year. So I was all over this opportunity when Renee reached out to me. So very excited for the topic and for engaging with you all.
Hi, everyone. Tia Mathis-Coleman, and I actually work for the Nevada State Treasurer's Office, and I work in the College Savings Division, so helping families to plan, pay, and save for post-secondary education, but also helping students responsibly borrow if they need student loans and things like that. We have a huge financial literacy piece through our division, so we're always focused on financial literacy for both families and students. So I am an alumni of a 2-time alumni of the university, and I teach business also. So it's really great to be with you here today.
Hey everybody, Chase Bush with Bush and Associates CPAs, double graduate of UNLV, bachelor's, master's in accounting. Obviously pursued the CPA route. I'm a licensed CPA here in Nevada. Volunteer with plenty of programs like the Jobs After Graduation, Junior Achievement, to teach financial literacy to high school students and kind of other levels of education. And yeah, super excited to be on this panel as well.
So, sorry, I was trying to manage the chat.
Yeah.
All right.
So with that, we do open it up to questions that anybody might have. So if you guys came prepared with questions, feel free to ask. And anybody who is on our WebEx, feel free to unmute and ask any questions that you might have for our panelists. I also have questions prepared just in case nobody else does, but I really encourage you guys to go ahead first. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with what? What tips do you have to start investing money? So for someone just coming straight out of college, what's those first steps?
Yeah, I think I'll pop this one off, guys. So I think one of the biggest things when you're first kind of graduating college is getting out of the mindset that, you know, you don't make enough to start investing. And I think it's just kind of, you know, a little bit of creating that budget, whether it's a small amount of investing, but if you can kind of go into it thinking about a budget and how you can structure your financials in a way to invest a little bit, I think that's probably step number one. You know, get the budget honed in, and as you kind of grow through your career and do your financial stages of life, you're going to be able to invest more and have more opportunities. But I think that biggest misconception I always see is that, you know, hey, I'll start investing when I'm making 100,000 a year, but you can start earlier, you know, 20, 100 bucks a week, a month, you know, anything kind of helps, because as we all kind of probably at this panel know that time value of money, money's going to grow and it's going to accrue. And so the earlier you can kind of get in, the better you'll be situated in the future.
Another path that sometimes when you think investing, you're thinking straight into like stocks and bonds, but sometimes investing in yourself and in your future may start with that first job. Don't pass up the opportunity to put money in your 401k and at least get that piece going, right? And as you earn more, as you grow in your career and you have other opportunities, start investing. A lot of the young students are very well versed and they're already doing a little bit of, you know, they're dabbling in investing on their own through different apps. So just give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance from the beginning early enough.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that and say, when she said invest in you, investing in you looks different for everyone, but investing in you could also mean going back to school. And it can also mean saving for, if you have little ones, saving for your little ones. It could also mean, it can mean a plethora of different things. So really just seeing what that looks like for you in your next step, I think is super important.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. We talk about this in class. So one thing that's pretty apparent is credit card debt. So credit card debt's at, I think, record levels as a society here in the US. So if you have credit card debt, there's a really good chance that you're paying up to 20+% in interest, right? And realistically, if you're investing in passive investments like stocks, bonds, or I don't even want to say this, is it a 5-letter word? Yeah, crypto. So if you're investing in those things, it's very unlikely that you will have enough appreciation or a gain in investing in those things then you are going to have interest expense in credit cards. So pay those credit cards off as soon as you can. Number two, if you don't have a savings bucket already for emergencies, make sure that's in order, because it'd be so unfortunate if you set aside $200 and you invest it, come to find out you need new tires for $500. So focus on those two things right off the bat. And if you have those in order, then I think it comes down to, like everyone's saying, understand the things you're investing in and also understand risk. So sometimes I hear from people, I don't want to invest because I'm just afraid that I might lose money. But they don't assess the risk that if they put it in a very safe asset, meaning one that does not go up and down in value significantly, but earns very little, then their risk is that they may not have enough appreciation over the lifetime to retire in the way they want to. So I think they need to really have an understanding of risk as well as they begin to invest. And that will probably encourage them to be more interested in things like stocks and bonds, which some are naturally gravitated to, but others not.
I have questions.
Jennifer.
Oh, she has a question?
Jennifer, you can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this. I have a question. For my sons, they're 18 and 20. What do you recommend to build their credit? Obviously credit cards are an option, but I just don't want them to, have credit cards, build them up, and then we have, as parents, we have to help pay for them. So what would you recommend for that age group to build credit?
So I'll start this one off again. I think one thing that a lot of parents do, I can speak personally, my parents did this with me, is they added me to one of their existing credit accounts. It was very interesting. At the time, I was probably 18, but I had a 20+ year credit history because they've had that credit card for over 20 years and it had been reported to the credit bureaus. But since my parents had handled that account well and managed it well, it automatically gave me a bit of a boost in credit from the start. So that might be an avenue to explore. And I think you're probably doing this, Jennifer, just, sharing with your kids about the importance of how to manage credit very early on. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's much easier to have a discussion up front rather than, hey, Mom, I haven't paid my bill in 60 or 90 days, and they say it's going to a collection account, something that's really going to be detrimental to credit. I think those two things are kind of useful.
Okay, great.
Go next. One of the biggest things I have always seen in my life, and you kind of see it a little bit more on the back end with somebody that might not have been as responsible with credit up front in their careers, is kind of a prepaid credit card. So it allows them to be responsible because you're prepaying that credit card, so you never really have to worry about going overdrawn. And it kind of teaches them the concept that, you know, at a basic level, whatever you're purchasing, you should be able to afford. And I think that concept, it does, helps build credit along with kind of teach them that responsibility of like, hey, you're only going to buy stuff that you can actually afford. So that's what I would suggest.
I think along with prepaid cards or secured credit cards, there's secured loans as well. So they feel more comfortable maybe grabbing a couple $1,000, setting it in a CD or in a savings account, and then getting the card secured by that amount. As your child or young adult starts using the card and building credit at a period of time, you can just choose to go ahead and close that out, and then they can apply for regular credit. A lot of the prepaid cards and secured credit cards also graduate within a year to 18 months if they're handled correctly. So a lot of what a bank is looking at as far as handling the credit card correctly is that payments are being done on time, of course, every month. A big part that sometimes people don't pay attention to or overlook is not going over the limit on the card. So always make sure that you're staying under that limit, not just so that you avoid getting a fee for it, but because they also look at something that's called like debt to credit percentages and other things that will help you build a credit faster. There's different punctuation for different things. So there's various avenues that you can use for them and help them so that they can do it responsible.
Correct.
Look
Perfect.
look into opportunities for financial literacy, because I think a lot of families, they expect their children to know things that we don't teach these things in school. So a lot of times when I meet students, they're like, I don't know how to read in cursive, or I don't know how to write a check, because they don't teach those things. And so I think it's really important that as a parent, you make sure that you find them that information so that, because financial literacy is something that you must learn or you're going to learn the hard way. And so if you could just find them like a class, which the treasurer's office offers financial literacy classes, but if you could just find them a free class on financial literacy, it doesn't have to be this long, extensive program, but just like a little brief overview, how to save, how to start a savings account, how to get a checking account, things like that, I think are really important.
Just to add 3 things that I didn't cover. Number one, credit reports or scores specifically is really impacted by 5 major buckets. 2 of those buckets represent 60+% of what goes into your score. Number one, because what the score is trying to calculate is the likelihood of you being 30 days late payment. That's what it's trying to predict. So the less likely you're going to have a late payment, the higher scores. The more likely you are, then the lower your scores. So 2 things. Number one, don't miss payments. And sure as hell, don't miss payments and be 30 days late, because that will likely get reported to the credit bureau. Number 2 is the amount you owe on your balances. And this really starts to impact with credit cards. So even if you're paying your credit cards on time, if you consistently have a high balance or go over the limit, your score is going to be impacted negatively. Those 2 things are the primary drivers of your credit score. So keeping those 2 things in check is important. So not missing payments, and then ideally keeping the balances owed, even if you can't pay in full, keeping it sub 50%, ideally sub 30%, is going to give you the most bang for your buck. Another thing on credit is safeguard your credit. Every year, you can check your credit reports for free. This won't give you a score, but it'll show you all the accounts that you have, right? And you review that for accuracy. You never want to wake up and find out somebody's open credit in your name. So that's step number 1. Number 2, you can even freeze credit reports or put holds on them to a degree, where the only way a lender can access them is if you reach out and usually have a special PIN that allows them to pull a credit report on you, because identity theft is on the rise. And not only will that mess up your credit score if someone opens a credit card in your name, racks up a big bill, and then leaves you to deal with fixing that mess, the headache associated is not worth it. So just a couple other things to keep in mind when we're talking about what will help with that credit score. Those two things mentioned earlier, but also just safeguarding your credit is so important.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Y'all have all mentioned a lot of the financial understanding that we don't do to educate young men and women who are coming out of high school and college. But one thing that I think we don't do a good job of is talking about your living situation later in life. Most people, when they graduate from college or their first job, are renting a location, most likely an apartment or something. If your dream is to own an asset and to have a home, what would your advice be to helping get a young adult ready to buy their first property?
I'll say I bought my first property when I was 25. And again, I think I needed more education. I just went out, I went shopping, almost like I'd buy a dress, picked what I liked, picked some carpet, like I was not educated on the process and what it was gonna look like 15 years from now. And so I think it's very important that students, families sit down and talk to someone to make sure that they're making responsible decisions, because these decisions will impact you later on the rest of your life. And so I just say to make sure there are people, there's resources out there. And so I think for me, that was a big mistake. I should have waited. And if I would have known then what I know now, I could have prepared and been in a much better financial situation, but I had to learn the lesson the hard way. And so I just say to be very cautious, because yes, you don't want to rent forever, but you also don't want to jump into something that's not the right fit for you.
Yeah, and just to kind of pick up on that, I mean, education's the biggest thing, right? If you can I'm a numbers guy, so I always had to see it, the numbers broken out of renting versus buying for it to make complete sense to me. So I think just a little bit of, like she said, the education and just assessing your situation, right? So self-awareness is one of the biggest attributes somebody can have. And I think when we're thinking of a house, right, it's such a long-term commitment, and to a degree, I do think there's some ways you can leverage that without being so kind of mindset of, hey, this is forever. But, just having that education up front to say, hey, what does this look like? What's my current situation? And thinking about the worst cases possible, right? Unfortunately, you have to consider the worst when you're making a huge decision. So just kind of looking at your situation, assessing it and seeing, does this actually make sense for you? And, kind of weighing those pros and cons.
I think a lot of people go into buying a home with the mindset of the emotion that's going to come from being in the home and the memories that you're going to make. And it tends to become an emotional decision at times that you make. So sometimes taking a step back and thinking about what everybody said, right? The future. I think one of the pieces that is overlooked at times when you talk to somebody who's all excited about this home and about this future that they're going to have in this place, they have the money possibly to put down on a house, or they can find a way to finance the property maybe without putting so much down or 0% down. But you don't think of the unexpected that can happen. So for people that have been living at home or in an apartment, there's a lot of maintenance that comes with a home. Things break, unexpected expenses come up. So you got to make sure that you're not just counting on, yeah, I got the money down for the down payment, I can do this, but that you have a reserve so that you set yourself up for success when you're in this home. So that's something that's super important and at times is overlooked.
When I talk with young ones about home ownership, most of them feel that it's out of their grasp until 5, 10 plus years. That may be true, but there's many cases where it's not true. There's several down payment assistance programs that are out there that are significantly underutilized. I know my wife and I used when we bought our first house. We didn't have to come out of pocket with anything to end up in a home that was great for starting our family. And those programs are still out there. And in fact, they've expanded. Great resources that I tell everybody, no matter what state you're in. I think you can look at HUD or housing.com. I'll probably get these names wrong. And it'll direct you to your local state, which will probably probably further direct you down to your local, your county or city that offers these incentives. So like here in Southern Nevada, we have the Southern Nevada Housing Authority, or sometimes the Rural Housing Authority, which have down payment assistance programs, sometimes up to $15,000 that usually is placed in sometimes in the form of a loan that's forgiven over a period of time. Or maybe, I think a lot of times now, there's not even a minimum period of time that you have to live in the home. So those options are out there. And then if you can afford the debt versus rent, there's several advantages in terms of being a homeowner versus a tenant. So some of those are like legal protections. In fact, if a landlord wants you removed or evicted from an apartment, it's in theory a lot quicker to get that done than it is to kick someone out of their home that they're the home. So if a bank tries to foreclose, there's several laws that really protect home ownership because the government really wants to sponsor that in many ways. And there's some other benefits that Chase probably gets excited about, they're the taxes, right? That you can write off interest expense. And there, in the past, there used to be tax credits, and probably still are some, related specifically and most often to first-time home buyers. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck. And home ownership is directly tied with wealth. So most wealth is generated by the appreciation of real estate. And most people don't have individual rental properties or company that has those. They just own their home. And as that appreciates in value, that equity is a place where they can access for things in the future, whether that's paying for college tuition, although I think there's better ways to do that, or all sorts of expenses or improvements. So I'm an advocate for home ownership, responsible home ownership. And like you said, Tucker, we need to do a much better job of setting our goals up for success rather than just crossing our fingers and hoping everything works out. Yeah.
And accept the education and help that's out there. For some homeowners, it will always ask you to take part of a first-time homeowner seminar or a workshop. And there's a lot of really good information that comes from it. You'll get a lot of tools, the calculator, rent versus buy, and others that are out there that help you calculate how much home you can afford. Not just going by what some person tells you, or they put you in some weird financing situation, because that can happen to get you the home that you are in love with. So educate yourself and accept the help that's out there. You can utilize it to your advantage. You will make a great decision, and it's going to be a great place for you to be in the future.
So you shared a little bit about the importance of good credit habits, paying on time, those kinds of things. Can you share a little bit more about, for those that may have gotten themselves overextended or are in a little bit of trouble, how to repair their credit score or raise their credit scores?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, kind of touched on this a little bit. It's budgeting, right? So budgeting is a lifelong task. You're not going to be perfect at it. You're always going to get better and improve. And I'm still improving myself with my budgeting tactics. But I think when you find yourself in a hole, having a solid budget and kind of sticking to that budget is the quickest way to kind of get you out of that hole. Because once you start budgeting, you can eliminate certain areas that might not be necessary in your life, and you can kind of see that visually and understand that, hey, why have I been paying this for the last 6 months? And so a lot of times we tend to neglect that thought because we don't see it right in front of our face. I think the budget forces us to kind of see what's really going on, because you can take your budget just directly from your bank, and so you see every transaction that's happened. And it's, the biggest thing with the budget is you can make life decisions to hopefully get on a better path to work towards paying down some of that debt.
I think you have to be very strategic too, as to how you go about handling, whether it's fixing your credit or whether it's strengthening your credit score. So yeah, it all starts with the budget, knowing how much money you have to work with. And there's different strategies. Do you pay higher-end credit cards first? Do you pay the smallest amount so that you can be done with it? When you're done, do you close the credit card and leave it open where you can come back and use it again? So talk to somebody. There's a lot of help out there. People can look at your individual situation and advise you according to that. And don't get frustrated. A big piece of it is when you don't understand, you get decision paralysis because you don't know what you want to do, how you're going to do it. So a lot of it is just kind of taking a step back, figuring out what resources you have, ask for help. and then meet with somebody that can look at your whole picture and that can advise you for what would be the best way to do it within your situation.
Where would you steer somebody who's young, who maybe doesn't have the money to go towards some of the higher end financial resources? Where would you tell them to start to find those resources? Local banker? Do you go to a certain person? Who do you go to?
You know, I would say social media now is such a huge platform. There's plenty of people on social media. It's free. I mean, not everything, you can't trust everything on social media. You have to be good. You have to be somebody that, you know, can speak really well on that subject matter and presents it in an accurate form. I think social media would be the first place I would start. If they can't afford
Yeah.
higher sources.
I would say probably like the credit union, a local credit union or bank can start there. I think that there's a lot of free resources. I guess finding them is the challenge. But I definitely would start with, if they have a checking account, I would start there and see what is offered from where you're already banking. But I know that there are a lot of free resources, so I think just finding the best one for you.
And I think goals coaching is a good way to start, because that person will look at you holistically. And although we don't fix anybody's credit, we can talk about different strategies that you can use within the situation that you're in, so that you can either maybe double up on payments and bring your debt to credit percentage down, or figure out. A lot of people think that going to an agency and paying for somebody to do some of the research is worth you not having the headache. But if you apply yourself, you can make those phone calls. You can call, once you obtain your credit report, there's a lot of information in there. You can negotiate some of those deals and figure out little by little what's the best way, how to attack it, and the best way to work towards it. But everything takes time. And yes, there is a lot of resources out there that are free. You just have to be smart about where you go, and make sure that you're getting the advice that's correct for you.
One resource that I've used in the past, I mean, I still go to the source all the time, Investmentpedia. They got very basic level finance courses or just materials that anyone can access, as well as very complex stuff to this day I don't understand. So it's a plethora of information, but it's very easy to navigate, and you can find the things specific to you and your situation. Like going back to your question about an individual who may have ran into credit troubles early on, you know, it's so circumstantial many times that it's hard to pinpoint. But one thing that is consistently a cause of that is, and I think Jason, everyone else is alluding to this, is about budgeting. You got to stop the bleeding. If your credit cards and other debts keep going up and never stabilize or go down, what that means is you're operating in a deficit cash flow standpoint. Meaning your lifestyle bills, it's more than you have that's coming into pay. So number one is stop the bleeding, because until it stops, you can't really address it. So that may even mean that you have to adjust your lifestyle. That can be very difficult. Number two, find out if anything's inaccurate on the report. There's so many times I think we've seen like a collection bill pop up, and we ask them, ask the client, hey, do you know what this is? I've never seen that in my life. I don't even, and we have to pinpoint. Sometimes it's errors. You just have to get it fixed, and then everything's fine and dandy. Other times you have to work, maybe settle it or fix something. One nice thing is if you ever feel like you're overwhelmed, a lot of credit card companies, if you call their customer service and you tell them that situation, what they would often do, because most times you're already pretty close to maxed out, so it's not like you can keep using it. Most of the times they'll put you in for a couple months of a position where they freeze your credit card, which doesn't really matter too much because you can't access it. If your balance is very high, there's very little access. And they'll often lower your rate because you can't access any additional credit. And they'll put you on a payment plan. And they'll ask you, what can you afford? And I found that to be a huge help. Also something I personally used very early on when I was a student here. So knowing some of these things that are available, even within the company you're dealing with, it's very useful to know. Rather than paying someone, there's some credit repair shops that charge exorbitant fees. And ultimately, these are things that most consumers can handle within their own purview.
Would you suggest balance transfers to a credit card that has a lower interest rate?
So it's again circumstantial, so it depends. So if you just do a balance transfer, almost every single balance transfer out there will have a transfer fee. Usually if 3% is the most common, sometimes higher, 5% as high as I have seen it. So sometimes you'll have to do the math, but if all we're doing is transferring balances for overpayment and on credit card debt, never really reducing it down below that 30% balance in relation to your outstanding, or commitment, I don't know that it benefits you as much as you would think. So for example, if you're paying 21% interest right now, and you find a credit card that's offering 18%, but it's a 3% transfer fee or maybe higher, it might net out. Might not nearly be as advantageous as it looks. So, but I do think it's good to take advantage of promos too. So there's 0% balance transfers and you have a plan to pay it off, that can help expedite it. So I don't think it's bad.
Yeah, I think it could be a temporary solution to a permanent problem if what we're doing is just jumping from one to another. But you're strategic about it and you know what your budget is. It makes sense to go into a card that's at 0% for a period of time. And then you know that you're paying straight into the principal of that amount. You've done your math, so you know that in 2 or 3 months, that balance transfer fee, you can have it paid off. And then you're out of that credit card and you start, marking them onto your list if that's what your goal is. You do have to be very careful with how you do that.
It's just curious, because I used to be in banking, those were our responses, and so just thought I'd ask.
How much money do I need to save for retirement?
An insane amount.
Define and save.
Yes.
Can you give me the
I
cent?
can give you some indication. So there's a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a very popular, probably one of the most popular personal financial books out there. I read it when I was pretty young, but something in that book stuck with me. So Robert Kiyosaki is the author of that book, and he says when he teaches classes and seminars, one thing he does specifically with young people is he places he kind of, I can't even articulate this well, but he makes it difficult for them to walk, and sometimes makes them put glasses on that I think reduces their visibility. The point is to mimic the effects that happen to us as we age. Do you really want to be working, under these conditions, 40 plus hours a week? Maybe it's not even realistic. It could even be painful. And the point is that you need to think about it because eventually it's a place that we all come to where we're not going to be as productive or may not even want to work at that point. So a couple things that are concerning is the healthcare costs keep rising. So that's why I'm saying I think we all need to be saving an insane amount. If you have children, you can talk to them about you're going to take care of mommy and dad. However, if you want to be, independent in your older years, you really need to start thinking about, okay, I may not be able to live completely independently on my own, and I don't want my family taking care of me. So I have to go to a facility where I can get adequate care, still maintain my independence. Very costly. So I think the sooner we plan retirement, the better. And I don't even hesitate to say that, $1 million and more is what we're talking about here in terms of retirement planning. To have a relative comfortable retirement, not even perfect. So it's a substantial amount, and it's very serious. Some of that is helped by Social Security, so if that's still around.
Right. I think the important thing about retirement is that we have to start thinking about it earlier.
Yeah.
And so I remember my very first job, my boss at the time, she was like, hey, you need to buy some years. I'm like, I don't want to buy years. Like, what does that even mean? I'm so young, retirement's nowhere. And now I'm like, I should buy years because now after working for 18 plus years, I'm like, I can't afford to buy years at this point because you continue to make more, and to buy a year is you can't pay. It's a lot out of pocket. But back then, when she told me to buy years, It seemed like a lot, but it really wasn't at the time. And so I just say to students now, especially when they get that first job, to start thinking about retirement early and to have a plan. If you know, hey, I want to retire by this age, you can set yourself up so that that can happen if you have a plan. But a lot of times what I see with my peers now that have been working, those that had the plan, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna retire in 5 years. And then people like me are like, I don't see retirement anytime soon, right? But it's one of those things where you have to have a plan. It also depends on your industry, I think a lot of times. Friends of mine that were in an industry where you work 30 years and you retire and then they pay out full, like you get out 80% of what you put in. That's not every industry, right? And so you really have to know what industry you're going into and really have a plan that's indicative of the industry that you're in. But I think the most important thing is you start thinking about it early. Those first few years in your career, you need to start thinking about, okay, what's my plan for retirement?
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, good.
The thought that came to mind when you were saying that is know your benefits. So when you start working with a company, know what they offer. Do they put money into a pension? A lot of people don't even get pensions anymore. So figure out what the company can do for you, at what percentage you can maximize it, so you can contribute a certain amount of money. The company will match that. Does it really make sense for you to put a whole lot more over if they're not matching it? Depends on what you're doing, with your money. When I talk to clients and this comes up, a lot of the conversation revolves around, are you comfortable with the salary that you have now? And do you feel that you're living comfortable now? Because if we have any economics majors in the house, we have to keep up with inflation. We talk about healthcare. So there's a lot. So if you're not able to live within what you make right now, that's kind of like what you're projecting to the future. So you're going to need 2 times more, 3 times more, depending on the individual situations. So take advantage of the resources, once again, that your company may offer or that you may be able to purchase to subsidize and add on to your income at that point.
Yeah, just one final thing is define what you want retirement to, right? So if we're, trying to plan this in these early stages, and sometimes it's hard and it might change throughout the years, but the sooner you start figuring out what your retirement looks like, then you can align your strategic financial goals, your budget with that retirement plan. And like they all mentioned, you can explore these avenues to reach those goals, but without having kind of a quasi-defined retirement and what retirement looks for you, you just might be spinning your wheels, right? And so I think that, and also be realistic, right? I think the biggest thing when dealing with financials is just coming to that self-awareness of like, hey, what is realistic for me at this point in time? Obviously, we can all hit the lottery tomorrow and we can be billionaires, but a lot of times in my profession, I see, retirement plans that are like, hey, I want to have $100 million in retirement by the time I'm 60. And it's like, okay, well, what do you make? And they're like, well, make 20,000 a year. And it's like, okay, let's kind of, figure out, that's still an achievable goal if you do it the right way, but let's talk through like, hey, how do we kind of align our financial goals now to reach that? So I think defining your retirement is key.
I have 2 young teenage sons, and so I teach them realistic financial responsibility. And so what habits would you put in place? So for instance, like now that they're just starting jobs, I'm making sure they're putting aside 20, 30, 40% of their check because they don't have bills. So like what habits do you currently practice in your life that have made you successful in your life right now?
Yeah, no, it's like,
I'm the worst at budgeting. So like, I'm still trying to learn
budgeting is always, like I said, I'm always getting better. I'm not perfect. You have those weak moments. It's kind of keeping that mentality of you're kind of doing this for your future. And the sooner you kind of install that methodology and you kind of live by that, the sooner you'll be able to reach those goals. So I think exactly what you have them doing right now is fantastic. It's building wealth and saving, and like I said, just diversifying that a little bit through, different kind of retirement options and just, honing in of, you have two kind of avenues, right? You have your necessities and what you absolutely can't go without, and then you have your luxury items, right? And so being able to kind of, like I said, figure out what the long-term kind of plan is. If you want to have nice cars, you want to do this, a lot of your luxury items now probably shouldn't be utilized because that's just going to take away from those longer financial goals. So I think just having those talks of, do you want to have, real estate down the road? Do you want a house in the next 5 years? Having that communication of like, okay, if we're looking at your budget, you have $500 a month being spent on luxury items that might not be necessities. Maybe we kind of cut that back a little bit to start pushing that 500 towards, your house or whatever your other financial goals could be.
So one thing I'm a big believer of is what gets measured gets managed. I'll speak from personal experience. For over 10 years, every 2 weeks, I do a personal financial statement. I update the numbers. When I started doing it 10 years ago, as a student, my net worth was negative. I had more liabilities than I had assets. The only asset I had was a checking account. I had a lot more debt than was in a checking account at any given time. But what it does is every 2 weeks as you do it, you notice progress like, oh, I am less in the hole, or less in the hole. Oh, now I'm positive. Wow, I hit $10,000. Oh my God, I hit 100,000. And then, things start ballooning and you don't want to stop. You want to keep going. It almost becomes like a game. And when it decreases, you're like, dang it, the stock market was down 2%. I know it's going to be, but when you're managing it, it keeps your eye on the ball. And I like what you do with your children already, getting them to save a portion of it. It's so much easier when you don't even see it. So you adjust your lifestyle. So that's a great thing of working through an employer. Say, all right, 6% to a 401k or anything. And then you just get your net pay and you make that your lifestyle. But all this time you're accruing this future wealth bucket for retirement or whatever. I really like that. And I have I have very young kids. So I do hope to teach them that as well. To save a portion of whatever allowance they get, but also to reward them for saving and to reward them for making good choices and penalize them for bad. Almost like investments. So, you didn't think this through enough. Well, you lost $1. But hey, I made $20. Well, you lost it. You lost a portion of it. And I'm very interested to see how that works. I'm not saying it does. I'm just going to try that. But I think what you're doing is something I definitely.
I started since they were young. They had to save all their money. They had to make their own large purchases so that they were fiscally responsible growing up, that it wasn't just as an adult at 18 years old.
That's a great.
Here's what you do. They already had those practices in place. And so, just
Good job, Mom.
try.
My dad tried. And when I was younger, he's like, only spend, like when I first got my first checking account, he's like, don't, like even then I'm like swiping at the Starbucks, swiping at the smoothie place. He's like, Tia, you need to take out $100 for the week. When you're adding your $100, no more swiping. Like this is your allowance for the week. And to this day, I have, number one, I have no cash ever. Because I'm like, I can't be responsible for this. So I just use the card, And so for me, budget is definitely something. And it's like, nobody's perfect, but I definitely need to work on it, right? Because it's just like, he used to be like, money does not grow on trees. And now my husband says the same thing. So it's like, everybody says the same thing.
Yeah, you and I are in the same boat because I am a spender. Like in our family, my wife is not a spender. I'm the spender because I love shoes. Like I spend ridiculous amounts on shoes. Like it's preposterous, and there's no way I can wear them frequently. And but I think it's okay. I really do. And sometimes it's why I think it's okay, because we talked about, in order to invest and to save for the things you want out of life, you have to have a surplus. So meaning your income has to be greater than the expenses and things that your money's needed for. There's two ways to do that. You can do both at the same time, but most of us can only do one thing one time. I'm that type of person. You can reduce your expenses or your cost of living. That's what I consider to be not fun. The other thing you can do is increase your income, finding creative ways to increase your income, right? I think too often we get trapped like I make 60 grand a year. I need to live within that and try to continuously manage our expenses, which is good. I'm not saying don't manage expenses, but too often we look out on the thing that could really propel us into greater abilities to save and enjoy the life we want. Looking at that income level and saying, should I be going for a promotion? Am I being paid fairly at the company I'm at? Do I need more skills to become more valuable in the workforce? I think too often we don't think in those terms, but it's so much more fun to make more money rather than nitpicking every little expense. And I think for whatever reason, we focus so much when it comes to budgeting on the expense items rather than what could we be doing to make some more income? Right? So I think I'm glad that came up because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough.
And also you work hard every day, right?
Yeah.
This is why I always tell myself. I work hard every day. I deserve a nice thing here and there, right? Like who wants to go to work and work hard every day and never get to enjoy it, never take a trip? Like my first, I would say 10 years of my career, I never took off a day, ever. So when I left my first place of employment, I had all of these days and they're not going to pay me for them, right? And so I was an excellent employee though, but I had nothing to show for it in my personal life. And so now I take days off, I take vacations, I buy myself a nice thing here or there. But I think it's all about finding your balance, and balance looks like different for each person. So you have to make sure that you're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. And if your girlfriends have new bags every day, if that's not you, you can't have a new bag every day, but you definitely deserve to buy yourself something nice here and there if you're working hard.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. If anybody online has anything, you are welcome to chime in, or anybody here. Or else I will ask another question.
I have one more question. For my boys that are both in college and they have one more year left and they don't have any school debt or credit card debt, but they're both looking into purchasing a car. Do you recommend, like we are always raised, don't be car poor, but right now as in prices, they're kind of expensive. Do you recommend them, because they have just little jobs, so they haven't finished college, so they don't have like a big boy job yet, So what do you recommend on the car loan?
I think this brings up a discussion I was talking about earlier. Lease versus buy, right? So oftentimes if you lease a vehicle, sometimes the maintenance is often included because the dealership is getting that car back and they want it well maintained over the tenure of your lease. If you own a car, that might still be the case, especially on newer cars, but many used cars, sometimes the warranty is up. You might be walking into heavy maintenance. So even if the price is cheaper, you still may be walking into some maintenance challenges. So it's all about opportunity costs. I think it may make sense even. So first and foremost, cars generally are depreciating assets, right? They're generally not wealth building assets. So, you can own a car and even own it free and clear, pay off a loan, and it'll have some value, but it's not going to continuously grow in its value, right? It's going to go down. So it's not the greatest asset. Now, for young ones whose income may change significantly over the next 3 to 5 years, maybe in this case, maybe it makes some sense to consider leasing. You won't probably be burdened with the high maintenance costs. And also you can walk into a car where you can kind of determine the affordability just by the payment alone and not, what's the value going to be? If I need to sell this in 2 years, will I have the loan balance down enough? So something to think about.
Yeah, and kind of like David said, these are depreciating assets, so they're generally not going to be worth what you originally paid for at that time. So just taking that into consideration. I like David's idea of structuring it maybe as a lease until they're at those certain income levels to kind of buy. I think that, you know, whenever I'm thinking about a car, right, you know, it's really just a point A to point B situation, right? And so taking that into mind, I think the used car could be a decent option. Obviously, you want to look into any warranties or extended warranties you might be able to get, but maybe it's just not the best time to get a brand new car. Maybe once they actually get in their profession and they start growing their financial career, that might be the opportunity to buy a new car and have a little bit more reliability. That's the only downside, I think, to kind of the used car option. But if you could supplement that with some type of warranty just to kind of get them there, just because I don't know, it sounds like they're not on that kind of level yet, which it seems like they could be in the very near future. So I don't ever want somebody to jump into a financial situation they might not be ready for financially. So I think just kind of weighing all those factors of, you know, used cars nowadays, they're nice and you can usually get them pretty, you know, they'll go forever. So cars last forever now. It's not I have a 53 Chevy truck at home and yeah, that thing was probably only good for about 50 to 100,000 miles. But now you get cars that'll go for 200, 300,000. So just, you know, weighing all the factors, cost benefits, but at the end of the day, the car is kind of a point A to point B situation. And, you know, as you grow in your career, the luxury car or your ideal situation car might be an option at that time. Maybe not for the time being.
I think in addition, you need to look at what is being offered as far as financing. So we talked a lot about credit. Not sure if your kids already have established credit or not, but oftentimes if you're going to go into a first time car buying situation, you're looking upwards of 20, sometimes even up to 28% that they want to charge for that vehicle. So think strategically, you know, do they need a cosigner? Can somebody go on that loan with them, bring that rate down? And in turn, the payment to an amount that makes sense, that they would be able to afford and pay with the job that they have now. They can always upgrade, as you were talking, as you move in your career, that they can upgrade the vehicle. You just have to be very careful because there's many different types of options out there for credit and for lending. So make sure that you check around before you're at the dealership. Once again, you know, googly-eyed and take whatever is being offered there.
Perfect. Thank you.
If there's somebody online who has one more question, we have a few minutes if you want to chime in, Deb.
Hello, yes, I would like to ask a question. My name is Natalie. I hear a lot of people talking about Roth IRAs and how that can also help with retirement. Can y'all share a little bit information about maybe your experience with that, or if you recommend Roth IRAs?
Yeah, no, great question. So an IRA is an individual retirement account. Roth IRA is not tax deductible. So it's post-tax, meaning you make income and you want to save it, but you've already paid taxes on that income. The advantage is when you need to access that Roth IRA when you're retirement age, you're not paying any taxes when you get those distributions from there. The other benefit is if you need those funds or a portion of those funds at any point, you can touch the amount up to the amount you've contributed, not the gains. Do not touch the gains. But let's say you're 40, which is younger than the retirement age of 59 and a half. If you're 40, you say, I need to pull $5,000 out. If you contributed over 20,000, you're okay. You're not going to be taxed on that. Chase, correct me if I'm entirely wrong on this. Now, if you go above that, if you save 20,000, but your account's worth 25,000 and you pull all of it, well, you're going to owe a pretty steep penalty on that extra $5,000 that you pulled that appreciated before you reach retirement age. So there's some great utility in that. To me personally, I still don't think that anything really beats if you are working through an employer, doing an employer-sponsored plan. Because oftentimes you'll get a match, but instead of having to pull from your retirement account, like for instance with a 401k, you can actually just do a loan against it. And it's a loan to yourself. So all the interest you're paying is right back to yourself. I mean, you may pay a very modest fee to the servicer who's handling all that. But I think I think the best mechanism is using like an employer-sponsored plan. And the other limitation with Roth IRAs is that I'm gonna get the numbers probably slightly wrong because every year they change, but you can only contribute up to 7,000-ish maybe a year in that. If you have more income to save, if you did a retirement plan like a 401k, that's $22,500 up to that you could be putting in there for personal contributions. So there's several limitations and there's also income limitations. So I think if you make like over 192,000 as a married family or 100 or 200 grand, you can't even use a Roth IRA. So there's a lot of things to consider in a given situation. Last thing I'll say on Roth IRAs, make sure that they're not just sitting in cash, because that's naturally what happens when you open one up. If your intent is for it to grow, you'll also need to invest in the funds that you put in that IRA. It won't automatically just happen. So there's two steps. You save and then you have to invest.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback what David said, this is basically tax going in, so it's tax-free coming out. And one of the reasons why it might make sense to do something like this, because if you think about earlier in your career, typically you're gonna make a little bit less, right? So you're not getting taxed as much, whereas later in your career, hopefully you're making a lot more money, and obviously the tax rates on that would be a lot higher. So that's one way to leverage the Roth, is just understanding the concept that you're paying tax now, but you're also paying tax at a lower bracket, rather than, later on in your career when you're making, hopefully for everybody, a couple $100,000, and you're not taking that money out and getting taxed on that percentage. So that's one way to leverage it. And then there's plenty of other aspects that, for businesses and small businesses, if you ever pursue that route, that an IRA could make sense and you can get tax deductions for it. So.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody so much for who attended online and in person, and an extra special thank you to our panelists. I learned a lot, so that was very wonderful, and I hope everybody learned stuff who attended. If you guys do have questions or you didn't hear something, we are recording this program, and I'm happy to email it out to anybody who would like a copy. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Go Rebels.
Already.